the angel of death impregnates a mortal woman, people stop being able to die. Instead, they linger endlessly on this mortal coil, not hungry for human flesh or brains, but simply for a place in a world that has no place for them. They walk, they speak, they have preferences and ideals, and their numbers are growing every day. As the living human population dwindles, the line begins to blur as to which is considered the dominant race and who are the monstrous aberrations. Author S.A. Bradley has frequently commented that shot-on-video films are the punk rock of horror, where lack of fun simply means more room for unlimited creativity and imagination, breaking ground and breaking rules. If you're not waiting for someone to give you permission to create, you can create whatever you desire, given your means and courage. Tonight's selection, Shatter Dead, is a shining example of just that. New York writer-director Scooter McCrae unleashes a bold vision of an undead apocalypse a decade before the success of 28 Days Later, Resident Evil, and Dawn and Shaun and Land of the Dead. Combining deep existential pondering with graphic violence and nudity is hardly the norm, but considering its heady brew riding on a micro-budget of a few $1,000s, the gesture is even grander. Join us as we celebrate McCrae's astonishing DIY effort, celebrating its 30th anniversary. Hopefully, dear listener, it opens a Pandora's box into the world of SOV horror for you, where if you can withstand the occasional technical limitations, these brave and bonkers souls have such sights to show you. It's been 30 years since Scooter McCrae unleashed the SOV masterpiece that is Shatter Dead upon us, and we've got an awesome panel to come and chat about this groundbreaking, I would say, feature. Let's talk to Aaron AuBuchon.
Hello.
John McDevitt.
Hey everyone, great to be here.
Derrick Carey.
God hates you.
And S.A. Bradley.
Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for having me on.
And we're going to be chatting about Shatter Dead from 1994, celebrating its 30th anniversary. Thank you for coming on the show, everybody, and a welcome. I am so excited to chat about this movie, and I just want to kind of preface it. When I sent out various titles at the beginning of the year, we were considering talking about, all of you just kind of dived in on this one. And I was thinking nobody was going to pick this one up. So when we do our little origin story, I would love to hear how you came to this movie for the first time and what your reaction to it was. Scott, do you think we can kick things off with you?
Sure. So I found this movie of all places in the bargain bin of Rasputin's Music, and it's kind of like a bargain basement amoeba. And they had a really nice DVD section at that time. And as soon as I saw the picture, the poster for it, which is a woman looking through a hole in a door with blood all around it, and it's called Shatter Dead, and I was like, wow, okay, this is worth at least taking a look at. And I got it at home, and I didn't realize at the point, because sometimes I grab things when the price is right, and I'm gripped by what I see. So I didn't even read about it. So I didn't know it was SOV. And I turned it on. I'm like, oh no, this is SOV. I don't know if I'm going to be able to hang with this. And in the very beginning, I was not so sure. And then the ideas started to come through. And I think that's one of the great things about SOV is that if you are someone who can go there, it's really kind of, you are pumping for the artist to transcend what medium they're in. And that's something that it's harder to do with film, perhaps. But when I see someone swinging for the fences on something that is shot on video, it makes me really take notice. So I was gripped by the movie. I was stunned at how much I liked it. And I was really amazed at how transgressive it seemed. And so it was one of those things where I had a hard time figuring who I could tell about it, because a lot of my friends are like, well, the people who are cineasts are going to have an issue with the SOV. And some of the SOV folk are going to be like, I don't know if I like this whole idea.
Yeah, it's not gonzo enough, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're right.
Derrick, how about you?
I am an old school, VHS store, archivist, and I used to scour every single video store and read every single box. And when this thing came out, like Scott said, how could you not be immediately drawn to that cover? That cover is dynamic. And with most shot on video films, they were bait and switches. for the most part, right? Let's be honest about it. And I don't think when I'm saying that, I'm saying it as a derogatory thing towards the films themselves. It's just the marketing was always, let's get something that's extremely dynamic on that cover that more than likely is never going to be realized within the film, and sell it to get people to rent that. Because once they got the money, they got the money. So it didn't matter if the movie was a piece of shit like Hip Hop Locos or something like that. So this film, I remember grabbing, because when you go to the video store back in the day, you know, if the A-list film was out, you went for the B-list film, and if that was out, you went for the C-list film, because as horror fans, we're insatiable and we just want to see every last goddamn thing that's on the shelf. And I took this home having already been accustomed to shot on video with like Tim Ritter or Eric Stanzi. This wasn't out of the norm for me. I jumped in head first, and to be honest, the first time I watched it, I think I was expecting something else. It sells itself as a zombie film, and it's not necessarily like your normal Romero ghoul zombie film. It's a completely different thing. But there were ideas, like Scott said, that hooked me. And I would repeatedly watch this over the years, and it's for the bang of my buck, top 5 shot on video film of all time. A legitimately great film.
John.
So the first time I heard about Shatter Dead, I was in middle school, believe it or not, and I think it was summer, and I went to my mom's workplace somewhere on the west side of Chicago because she didn't, have anybody to watch me. I went across the street to this mom and pop video store that I had never gone into before, and they had a bunch of tapes that I had never seen before, including a bunch of horror films. And there was somebody there, just a punk, probably like in her early 20s. We started talking about horror movies, and she asked me if I ever saw Shatter Dead. And I said no, and she told me it's a really, really great film and you should watch it, which is maybe a strange thing to tell a middle school kid. And she even went as far as to say that the main character is a woman who has sex with a zombie, and I laughed. And she said no, but it's like really beautiful, and it's more powerful than you might expect it to be. And it wasn't until years later that I finally tracked down a copy of the film and watched it. And I was pretty blown away by it. I agree, it's one of the best shot on video films.
Nice. Aaron, how about you?
I'm bad at this game, as we've talked about before, but I actually do kind of remember. I don't remember the exact time that I watched it, but I do know that I'm a latecomer to the film because kind of as Scott, as you said, it's not that I was suspicious of shot on video as a genre, because I don't think I realized that it was its own genre until after things like Bleeding Skull and Analog Nightmares came along to kind of encapsulate it all. And it was one of those resources, I don't remember which one, but it was either Bleeding Skull or Analog Nightmares, somewhere along the line which is, a website that has 2 books out, or a book that all are collections of shot on video for those folks who aren't familiar with them. But one of those places I read about it, and I was like, this sounds like my particular brand of transgressive. And it really does seem like it was made by the people I hung out with in the mid 90s. Very, very much. Like everything about it, I feel like is exactly the genre of people that I hung out with at that time. And at the same time, there's a lot that I find almost unwatchable about the film. So I really like it, and I really don't like some things about it. And that is why I think I keep coming back to it, to see if I can find my way into fully liking it or figuring out what it is I don't like about it. And I think I've figured out a little bit more of what I don't like about it. And it's very personal, and we'll talk about that later.
I'm looking forward to hearing about that. It was the early 2000s, and I was voraciously trying to catch up because I'd kind of gotten away from the horror genre, and I came back and I was like, I need to, get all my reference books, and I was making all my lists, and I was reading the FAB Press compendium, and they had an interview with Scooter McCrae. And that was the same big book where I found, Coffin Joe and Rinse Dream, for Cafe Flesh. So it was a great book, and I highly recommend it. But that was the first I'd heard of it. And what the funny thing was that I never heard about it from anybody else. Like that was the one source and that was talking about Shatter Dead. And I'm like, okay, well, and at the time, I think Netflix was still doing its video via mail. And that was how I came across it. It was either that or there was a Green Cine out of the Bay Area, but it was one of those two DVD by mail services. And I saw it. And I was just like many of you, I was like, I don't know quite what to make of this because it's got such big ideas and it's actually realizing them.
Yeah.
You know, it actually follows through on it, and the limitations don't feel like it actually limits it. You kind of get into that vibe and you're like, no, this is accessible. And I think we were talking about backstage, this film is punk rock and Trauma is punk rock, but they're different kinds of punk rock, but they're very much about make your own damn movie. You know, don't let somebody else be the gatekeeper. Take what you need and go make your movie.
Yeah.
And
Dead Milkmen versus Neurosis. That's
see, I can't hang with you. I mean, like that was as close to punk rock as I can get to say the words punk rock.
I got that reference.
Well, I'm sure everybody else in the panel got the reference. I'm just too square. I'm going to go grab my Indigo Girls album. And if somebody wants to kind of take a brief stab at a synopsis for this one, just the basic concept, and then we can dig a little deeper. Derrick, how about you?
This is up for debate, and I think, you know, Scooter McCrae has kind of come out and left some breadcrumbs as to the overall plot and meaning of this movie. But the movie starts off with what appears to be an angel fucking a woman from behind. And from what I've heard, that symbolizes it's the angel of death fucking humanity.
Mm-hmm.
And then we start the movie, I believe, what was it, 17 months later?
17 months later. Yep.
And we are now in a world where people cannot die. But this is not your Romero ghoul type film where the dead come back to life and want to eat the living or wreak havoc upon the living. The dead just keep existing. In whatever state that they were oft in, they are now in that state for perpetuity, forever. And the movie centers around Susan, who is this woman that went out to the grocery store in order to get provisions to bring back to her boyfriend. And it's basically a road movie done in vignette style until she arrives her way back to her boyfriend. And you get to see not just the world itself, but how she reacts, and she kind of like is our avatar through this world, and how the normal person is reacting to the vain nature of humanity, a lot of existential conversations. Just there's a ton that goes on in this movie, but it also seems like it's a very simple, you know, road movie from point A to point B. So that's essentially Shatter.
That was great, Derrick. Nicely done. And we will be digging into some details. So if you haven't seen the movie, just be prepared. There will be some spoilers. Thank you. That was great, Derrick. That basic concept, right? The dead can't die. And I feel like, do we get dead that come back as well? Like, do we get people that are reemerging from graves? I can't remember.
Yeah, there was a section where they discussed there. I think it was on a radio broadcast where all of a sudden somebody had heard in the graveyards.
That's right. That's right.
Of the dead, and they unburied them.
Right.
Well, that's one of the things that I always thought was once wonderfully existentially poetic, because there's a moment in there where they talk about that once the body's gone, sooner or later the body just completely disintegrates. And they're still not dead, that their screams are in the wind. And I thought that's so terrifying and that's so brilliant. And that's exceedingly punk rock. But I thought it was such a great, horrifyingly poetic thing that is kind of the sentence or the portion of it that speaks to the entire movie for me.
There's a French film called We Come Back, or They Came Back, it tackles similar terrain. But that one's very much about more intimate family members, lovers, things like that return from the dead. This one, they're almost all strangers that Susan encounters on the way.
It's kind of like a quest movie in that way. You can call it a road picture or a quest where they're continuing to meet monsters, you can say, and where we continue to find out something new about those monsters. What I think is really interesting about that concept is that early on in the movie, we see Susan coming out of the store, and we're seeing the dead, mangled, essentially as more than second-class citizens. They're essentially being homeless, right?
Yeah.
They're trying to steal stuff like her gas and things like that because they are not able to live with people. Not that they don't want to live. They want to be human. They want to pass. All they want to do is pass. But the humans can't deal with it, the living humans. It's like an abomination. And I think that that's a really interesting deal. What's cool about the movie to me is that it never tries to explain, outside of the angel of death fucking somebody, never. What I love about movies like this, or something like Picnic at Hanging Rock, is people go insane because they can't answer what's right in front of them. There's just no logic to it whatsoever. So the preacher and stuff like that, they're just making it up as they go along because this is not what's supposed to be happening. And so living in we've all gone through the pandemic. We've all gone through 9/11. Well, not everybody, but many of us are old enough to have that. And we somehow find that new normal. And so there's this weirdness where this is in that formative time of a new normal. And people are wearing makeup so you don't know if they're dead. And the worst thing that you can do is make the person who's trying to pass no longer able to pass. Yeah. The cruelest thing that can be done. So there's that part of it I thought was really interesting, that there's we're looking at a world that can't explain what's happening, and it literally is driving some people insane and changing the structure of how the culture deals with each other.
And what's interesting too is it seems that it also empowers some of the people who go through that transition of becoming dead and still being alive. Numerous characters in the film seem to see it as a benefit, as kind of the next stage of human evolution.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really fascinating to watch. And also connecting it to COVID, the dead in this film lose their sense of taste, just like many people do when they get COVID. And we've been talking about similar stories. And another one that comes to mind when I'm thinking about Shatter Dead, it's from about, I want to say 7 or 8 years ago. It was a British TV show called In the Flesh.
Yeah.
I don't know if anyone saw it. Yeah, but it's, for those who don't know, it's has a similar premise of everyone who died a particular year comes back to life as feral zombies who feast on the living. And then scientists discover sort of a cure that restores the mental and emotional faculties of the zombies so that they are who they were before they died, and begin reintegrating with the living, with their loved ones. And they're haunted by the memories of what they did when they were feral zombies. It's like torturous to remember that. Mm-hmm. And also, In the Flesh is very queer, and I really like the queerness in Shatter Dead. I think it's kind of a layer that you don't find in many horror films of that era. I mean, if you dig, you can find a lot, but it wasn't the norm. I really love it.
One of the things I liked about the zombie themes overall in this film is, we get this long sequence between Susan and Mary, which is kind of the philosophizing about life and death. And I love the short-sightedness of the character who decides to take her own life to become a zombie so that she stays young and beautiful, forgetting, of course, that as soon as somebody stomps on her face, she stays that way too. Yeah. And just it kind of it points out that human faculty for just not thinking a thing all the way through and making big dumb decisions based upon whatever the most convenient truth you can kind of grind up from the premise that you can have in front of you.
There's also one of the things going on that I always walk away from, and when I'm watching this film, it always pops up, is just how pointless the actions of most of the dead are. Like, they're just hanging on to things that no longer matter to them. Like, why do they need money? Why do they need to have cars? Why do they need these things or jobs or things that meant something, where now they don't eat, they don't need to sleep, they basically can do whatever. They're not constrained by this body, other than the fact that, like you said, short-sightedness, eventually it's going to rot and it's going to go away. It brings to me a very interesting idea of what is really the point of any of this that we're going through in general. So to put ourselves into these scenarios, these high stake emotional scenarios where it's life or death, when really in this world none of it matters.
Right.
None of it matters. It's interesting.
And it's just as petty, right?
Yep.
There are the dead who don't like the other dead. It's like there are factions within. It's not just dead and alive. It's dead and then these dead over here, and the dead that want to pass for living, and the dead who want to be accepted as dead. What you just said, Derrick, that whole I just get the sense that they don't have a society yet that's built for this. And so they only know this society. It's funny we talk about COVID because we all went a different direction when COVID happened. And then we all kind of slowly worked our way back to where we were. And I'm I talked to so many people who were like, oh man, never going back to that, never going back to that. And everybody is pretty much back to that now.
Yeah.
And it's you gotta find the normal that or you have to invent something that's new and everybody else has to buy into it. Otherwise you're on your own.
Yeah. There's also this tension built into it, which is hinted at in the Romero films. Although towards the end, when we start having the evolution, the zombies are starting to speak and think on their own, that this is the end. Right. I mean, it does say God hates us all. This is the last generation. Right. I mean, whatever is born, that's it. As far as we know, we don't know if anybody's having children. And if they are, there's not that many. How long is this going to go? So the idea that you're always looking at your mortality in these things, that there's a finality to what you are, that they are going to win. What winning looks like, who the fuck knows? But the living, I think Moreno said it once. He goes, "We're the walking dead. Sooner or later, we're going to be there." And I think there's that tension that's in there. Almost you can see the cycles of grief and how certain people are dealing with things. I think it's really telling when they have this, it's kind of like Night of the Hunter, where you've got this family. It's not a family, but it's all these people who are living in this place together. It's kind of communal. And they're just in there. But of course, you have to have people who come in and say, we can't stand that you're trying to pass. Right. We can't deal with this. We need to tear you apart. So they know they can't kill them. They're not chopping them to pieces. They're not setting them on fire and making sure that they don't exist anymore. They're maiming them. They're tearing, fetuses, all this madness that's happening in there. And that's the inability to deal, right? I cannot look at the abomination that's in front of me. I too will be that abomination. Well, hell no, we're not going to let God die. We're going to talk for God. He's going to do all this shit. And I think that's really interesting because there is an acceptance that goes towards the end of the movie, even though the movie has, spoiler alert, it's a pretty dark fucking end.
Yeah. And the film is just so powerful in its depiction of mortality. I mean, if you can see past the low budget, the iffy acting performances, and just kind of give yourself to the film and the story that it's telling you. I'll just speak for myself as a viewer. I felt the weight, the heaviness of mortality so intensely while watching this film, and it kind of formed a pit in my stomach that kind of made me really terrified of my own death, my own inevitable death. And I love when a film can have that impact, especially one that's just made with zero resources, but an incredible vision.
Yeah, Stark Raven really, even though her portrayal for the majority of it seems fairly apathetic towards the entire situation that's going on, that final scene where, again, spoiler alert, where her boyfriend has decided to end her life for her, and she passes over and she's looking into the mirror, and the way we feel her pain through her eyes, in the way that she gets water to make her give herself a tear when she can no longer cry, is one of the most heartbreaking endings of any film I've ever seen.
It's fucking brilliant to think to that point. And the whole idea of spoiler alert is
I put the banner up. We're fine.
what happens to the boyfriend. There's something so tender. Is that the word that you would use? I mean, he falls out a window. He's laying there. He's crushed, right? She knows what has happened to him. She's basically turned him into, a sandbag. He has nothing left of him. And the dead come to his rescue. The dead see him and they're like the Good Samaritan. And they start putting these boards on him, and he's he's sweating, but it's actually because the glass is ice. But the whole idea of the pain of getting him up there, and her juxtaposed with her coming to an understanding of what has just happened to her, and then the disembodied voice coming up the stairs is like really beautiful, grotesque. It's like Jodorowsky at that point, or Jodorowsky at that point. There's this whole thing of, you can see this crazy imagination taking over, and it's so simple. Ice, couple 2x4s, stay limp while we pick you up, and it works so well.
Well, and we talked about the big swings. I mean, the fact that it opens with that image of the two women, one of whom turns into an angel in front of our eyes. And that apparently wasn't even in the original script. The Sub Rosa DVD has 3 great commentary tracks where he's talking with the cast. He talks with his director of photography, who was pretty much the only other crew member. And then there's Scooter doing a solo one. That image that it's never really explained that is the cause of what comes to pass. And the fact that it's 17 months later, which is such a wonderful random, number. But this woman that we meet later has been pregnant for 17 months. And that was the inciting incident that broke the world. The fact that never gets explained is one more in a huge string of big ideas that he's throwing out there for you to play around with in this low budget movie.
It is a film that really wants to play with the notion of immortality and our desire for immortality, and how horrific it is if you think about it for a nanosecond. I read this really amazing article some years ago about how being immortal would be truly damning. How if you think about like how human cognition works, how our lives feel like, a day takes like an hour these days because we've gotten older and everything moves very quickly and everything's very stressful. Now imagine you live to be 500 and that timetable accelerates. And I feel like this film more viscerally kind of plays with those ideas, because I don't know that they had made it so obvious. But again, if you get pitched out of a window and get turned into a bag of broken glass and jelly, you get to be that forever.
Yeah.
You're not going to heal.
Right. You're not going to heal, which is one of the things, so I said there were a couple of things about the film that I find problematic, and one of them is much bigger than everything else, but for me personally. But for a film that swings so hard for the upper decks, one thing I will ask you guys is, how is it, and maybe they explain this and I haven't noticed it because I've only seen the film 2 or 3 times, but how is it that the physical injuries are so obviously impairing, but you can get shot through the fucking frontal lobe and have put most of your brain blown out, but it doesn't affect your capacity to speak or move or any of those things? So again, a movie that is so smart, I found, unless they explained it somewhere that I missed it.
There is a slight line, and it's during that sequence with the 2 women up in the bedroom.
Yep.
Where when Susan is kind of beating her to a pulp, she says, "Yeah, you can smash my face, but it's the spirit that
it's not the brain, it's the soul."
The soul.
Yeah.
Which is why the voices in the wind was this whole thing. Like, you don't have a mouth anymore, right? How are you screaming? And yet it's the idea that there is this energy that you're, no matter what, you're still.
The soul is what's driving you, not necessarily your brain anymore.
I thought a wildly random and wonderful touch was also that the dead, I guess these disembodied spirits can also call you on the telephone again. Until they drive you insane.
Why not?
Such a great sequence.
Yeah. And this is a little bit random too, so go with me on this tiny journey. But it made me think of all things, the Zuni Fetish Doll segment and Trilogy of Terror, because that segment opens For me, I think it's the best depiction of a codependent relationship that I've ever seen on screen. Just Karen Black not being able to get off the phone with her mom. Like there's just this entanglement there that she can't shake. I thought of Karen Black in Trilogy of Terror when we met Susan's boyfriend and he talked about what happened with his mom and his sister calling him over and over on the telephone.
Yeah. And also the way that he treated her once she found out he had drugged her, and the guilt tripping that started happening about, well, you don't want to shoot me, then you're going to have to help me sip, or what did he say? Sip things through a straw, and you don't want me to be this way. Which was kind of a cruel thing to say, but also something that a lot of people would genuinely feel.
Well, I think it's really interesting too what both John and Aaron and Derrick had to say about this most recent conversation, which is the phone thing. To me, was like how grief won't let you go. And so the idea that they were calling up and, you know, you're still stuck with these people, it's just a disembodied voice, which is what grief has always felt like to me. It's like, here it comes calling one more time. And so I thought that was really interesting. And it's so banal. And the idea that if you are around forever and the phone company is still going, these calls could go on for quite a bit of time. And Aaron mentioned something about the idea of the madness that would happen with immortality, and where Zuni fetish came up for somebody. For me, it was thinking of Interview with a Vampire, because there's a sequence in the book where Lestat finds out that there's the oldest vampire in the world is in Latvia or something like that. So they get on a train and he's so excited. He's finally going to meet someone older than him so he can learn something. He's the teacher. He's the board teacher through all this stuff. And they get to the castle and he's a drooling mess. Just starts coming at them. He has no cognitive behavior anymore. He's just a killer eating rats. He's scabby. And they put him out of his misery. Lestat kills him and kills him forever. And it puts Lestat into such a depression for who knows how long. But the idea that you go, well, maybe I'll really mature with age. Maybe I'll learn the rhythms of the spheres by the time I'm 1,000. But the reality is, you know what? You'll probably want to give yourself a fucking lobotomy after you've seen your 900th winter. You're like, fuck, there's another salting of the grounds. Oh, you got to be fucking kidding me. Whatever it might be, the idea that one day you'll just suddenly go, I think this is the last of this I ever want to see. And it's not going to be the last.
I call that Tuesday.
Taco Tuesday.
See, everybody on this panel would just be like, oh my gosh, now I finally have time to watch all those movies I wanted to watch.
Box sets.
Thank goodness. Exactly. I could finally make it through that box set that I've been meaning to get back to.
And the electricity goes off. No.
And you're like, no.
And your glasses get crushed, right?
Yep, exactly. Aaron, what was the other one that really bothers you?
And like I said, it's just very much personal, but I just can't believe that we're supposed to like Susan. She is, for me, her delivery is so monotone and flat, and she's so disgusted with everything, and we never get to see kind of any peaks and valleys in her persona really very much. She goes from just like broadly irritated to, wildly angry, and for me personally, there's nothing for me to connect with in this film as far as like a human person, I don't like Dan's motives. I don't like the sneakiness that Mary brings into the situation. So I'm just sort of like, I find myself drifting away from it. It's a movie that I like the concepts that it introduces a great deal, but I find myself like, in the midst of it, I'm picking up my phone going, shit, I just lost it for 5 minutes, because I'm not emotionally connecting to any of the characters. And sometimes I can watch a movie that I don't need to emotionally connect with, but this one, for some reason, no. So I agree with everybody. It swings and it hits a lot of the balls. I'm trying to make sports metaphors. I'm shit.
Good job. Wow.
But my point is, it goes for things that are above its pay grade, and I think it reaches them a lot. I wish that it had a little bit more emotional connectivity.
I do agree that there is a flatness, a monotone nature to Susan's performance, and it is very arguably a flaw of the film. And I do think there are moments when her performance transcends her ability, like especially those final moments that we talked about before with her in the mirror, just placing tears on her cheek. It's so powerful, and I feel like she nails that scene. I also wonder, and I only have this thought now, if maybe there's something intentional there. Something that does seem to be not absent from the film, but certainly not the focus of it, is, I guess, the human connection component. And I think there is something there. I do think the film is trying to have a conversation about just what, in this new circumstance of people coming back from the dead and finding a form of immortality, does it expose about what really makes us human? There's definitely a conversation happening, a literal and figurative conversation happening between Susan and her boyfriend, just about their relationship and what that means to them. It does seem that Susan struggles to find people who she can really connect with in this new world. And it seems to be one of the conflicts of the film in a way that's probably intentional.
Yeah,
I think it is.
I agree. I'm not sure it's unintentional that she's as flat. I'm not sure we're supposed to like her. You know, I'm not necessarily sure that the way that she's introduced. I mean, bad acting aside, right? Usually bad actors will overdo shit, not underdo shit. And so she's like trying to be like she's one thing. And that's a very hardcore kind of dead emotions, right? Everybody's dying around you. You can break down and cry a lot, or maybe you just kind of go this thing of like, fuck, everything is a grind.
Yeah.
Yep.
And that's kind of how I felt about her. You know, when I think about things that drive me crazy about the movie, it's stuff that, because I did a shot on video around that same time that he was doing his, nowhere even fucking near as long or as good. The thing that I see out of it that drives me crazy is sometimes the craft is really bad, right? Like the sound. I have both the Saturn's what is that? Saturn's core.
Saturn's core.
Sub Rosa. And the Sub Rosa, I know they fixed it on here, but the beginning of that movie, you could not understand the preacher. The sound was so low on his voice. I was like going, oh man, they're killing me here. I want to be with this movie. And there's also a thing that happened, as Aaron said about personal. I don't know if he knew that he was getting someone who was trying to do like a Howard Stern character, the Fart Man character, or whatever. And that fucking takes me out of the movie every time I see it. And I didn't know it at the time when I was making mine, but I had these people who were supposed to be being interviewed for the news. And one of the guys is doing Beavis or Butthead. I don't remember which one, but I did not know. I was like, "Oh, this is a funny thing. This is great." And then I watch it with people and like going, "Who? Oh, that's Beavis." And I'm like, "What the fuck is Beavis and Butthead?" And I had to find out about this from that. And every time I watch it now, I'm like, "You fucked my movie, man. You put it right. I did a bad enough job, but I did not need you bringing another character from another thing." And it drives me crazy in that movie. I hope that he didn't want that to happen, but I don't know how it happens except for, you know, my foolish experience. But it seems like a very weird thing to just suddenly have Howard Stern suddenly appear and say something about assholism. And I'm like, going, okay, you're stealing a little bit from John Waters and you're doing Howard Stern. I don't get that, but that's my biggest gripe with the movie.
I mean, I think what Scott said has always been the one part of the movie where I've been like, what is this? Because it's just so tonally off from the rest of everything in there. But to add to the conversation about Stark Raven and her portrayal throughout the film, there is a large section of this movie in which her character is exhausted. And it's purposely like discussed through the movie. So I can see where people would find her portrayal for the most part to be a little too boring. I've always kind of liked her portrayal because it feels like she's just emotionally exhausted and spent.
Yeah.
Like the entire experience of the world, just having in because this is a road movie and she's having to deal with constant interruptions by people that just want to use her. like throughout the entire thing, she is exhausted. So and she's also agitated because every time she's about to get somewhere, someone new fucks with her.
Yeah.
And she just wants to be left the fuck alone. She wants to go home and be with her boyfriend, which, whoa, is that a mistake? but that's how I've always kind of taken away from it, is that she's someone who, because that last scene really gives away who she really is inside.
Yeah.
Because when she walks into that apartment and she's with her boyfriend, boy, she livens up.
Mm-hmm.
Boy, there's a smile on her face, and she feels warm, and she's like an actual person, where when she's dealing with the rest of the world, boy, she's got a wall. She doesn't want to like talk, doesn't want to interact. And I think that's a very intentional thing. And I mean, you could put it on it being, you know, I hate using the term non-actor, but you could put it on the fact that Stark Raven isn't necessarily like the most seasoned actor on the face of the planet. But I really feel, and I've always felt this way, it was a very intentional kind of thing.
Well, and she's non-heroic. You know, she's trying to get through this. She's trying to get home, and she's not, I don't think she's looking to be appealing. I don't think she's looking to be charismatic. I think you're right, Derek. I think like it is deliberately downplayed. It is deliberately monotone. Something that struck me watching it this most recent time is that there's very much the case of The Last Man on Earth, where she has become the monster. She's the only living person we actually encounter in this entire movie.
It's so very I Am Legend.
Yeah, exactly. I was like, oh my gosh, like she's the one that doesn't belong. You know, she's the one that the people, the dead, are going to be talking about at night and going, there's this person out there who wants to hurt you.
And Derek, I really love what you said about just the final scene of the film between Susan and her boyfriend kind of revealing who she is. That is a moment when she opens her heart to someone else, and she does kind of lean into this mysterious and beautiful connection that she has with another person. And it's really beautiful also to see the way that she adjusts, the way that she finds ways to make sex work when it isn't working the conventional way. And it is a little bit comical at the same time. But yeah, just kind of using the gun and turning it into a strap-on so that they can have sex. And it's filmed in such a beautiful, tender way. I mean, not unlike the film's opening scene with the sort of androgynous angel fucking the human woman. I don't know if I can say fucking on this podcast. Sorry.
Oh, you
I've already
certainly
spoiled
can.
that.
Yeah.
I think everybody has.
Yeah.
But
If not, fuck.
I really enjoyed seeing her enjoy herself in a moment in this film, because she hadn't experienced that at all until the very end.
Yeah, and that she's willing to go to a place of meeting you where you're at, you know, that she does want to make things work, and that she basically gives of herself. She gives him her weapon to be the instrument for him.
Yeah, I weirdly enough, I never saw that as a funny scene. You know, I can see how
it's absurd it's absurd in concept.
Yeah, but I always thought that it was kind of brilliant in its own way. It was somewhere that I didn't expect it to go. I certainly gave kudos to Scooter for having the boyfriend be such a schmuck that she goes to. That is not an easy thing to try. I mean, she could just go home. She could never get to him. He could be dead. There's all these choices, but instead he takes the complex choice and makes us work through that. That the victory that she had rots right in her mouth. It's just not worth it. The fruits of victory are terrible. And I thought that it was really interesting to have it turn into like this relationship issue. And, you know, she's chosen this idea to be with him. She maybe made it through the day only thinking that I can get home to this fucking guy. Whatever it is, she was idealizing it. And to have that fall apart at that point was really kind of, I thought it was very smart, and it was mean. I mean, it's mean to the audience. In a way.
I'll say one thing also, maybe this is also part of my personal irritation with the film, but I looked incredibly like Dan in 1994. I mean, every time that guy comes on screen, I'm like, holy Christ, that guy. Me and that guy would have looked at each other and been like, whoa.
One other story I'll mention that came to mind while revisiting Shatter Dead is Otto or Up with Dead People. I don't know if anyone's ever seen it, but yeah, it's a really, really wonderful film. And just even more queer, like wildly more queer than Shatter Dead. And it does also kind of explore the monotony of being a zombie, like of the life of being a zombie. And there are twists in that film, some pretty big reveals that I won't spoil. But yeah, and it also kind of explores different types of sex that people who are zombies discover with each other, and how sex kind of becomes kinky when you're a zombie. It's pretty interesting. Yeah, definitely. Everybody who's watching or listening, check out Otto or Up with Dead People. It's fantastic.
That is actually a great segue, because I wanted to kind of go around, and because I think this is probably the first shot on video movie that we've talked about on this show, at least. And I would love to hear some people's recommendations for some other shot on video films that they would like to give a little highlight to, so that any viewers got their lists handy that they can jot down.
One I can think of that if everybody hasn't seen that everybody should see is Eric Stanzi's Scrapbook.
Yeah, that was going to be the one.
Yeah, I think it started a particular kind of extreme horror corner of shot on video. And I think that it is a progenitor of a certain kind of shot on video sort of sub genre that came off of it. And it was not the first film I saw by him, nor do I think that it is his. Like, it's such an interestingly different film from some of the other films he made, but wow, is it the one that has, stood up to the test of time.
Yeah, I would recommend that as well. I know Scott and I have done like 2 podcasts on Scrapbook alone. It's a hard one to watch, but it's absolutely essential. I would throw out a couple more. If you like the goofy shit, there's a really good one called Satan Place, which is an anthology film that is some of the silliest shit I've ever seen in my entire life. Definitely recommend that one. But if you're into more stuff like this, like Shatter Dead, obviously check out 16 Tongues, which is the follow-up film that Scooter McCrae did, and it leans even more into the sexuality that was hinted at, not very well hinted at. I mean, it's right there in your face in Shatter Dead, but
not so much a hint as a slight.
Yeah, right. And also, if you're into cinema of transgression, Charles Pinion's Red Spirit Lake.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Check that one out.
Yeah, I mean, Red Spirit Lake that's another one that swings high and manages to hit a lot. It is highly conceptual and really smart.
Yeah, I really love that. I also will say Twisted Issues, which is that's Pinion's first. And what's cool about that one, or fun about that one, is that it started out as a documentary about the Gainesville, Florida punk rock scene. And in a weird way, it says more about the Gainesville punk rock scene than it probably would have if it was just like a Penelope Spheris documentary. But all of the people who were in it, the skate punks and the bands, got tired of trying to be serious. So they made this really weird story that barely holds together about a kid who's a skateboard punk who gets killed by a bunch of metalheads, and he comes back to life and he takes them out one piece at a time. But through that, there's this whole weird look at TV as being a way that we experience life. And there's some interesting stuff where I don't know, because it was made in like 87 or 88. I think it came out in 88. I'm not sure how much we had like the skateboard punk videos where people would do the skateboard routines, and there'd be like this weird Hail Bob. How come I can't? Church of the Subgenius.
Church of the Subgenius.
Yeah. So there was that whole Church of the Subgenius feel that there is in Twisted Issues. There's a bunch of stuff that obviously he did not pay for, and I don't know if he could ever show the movie anywhere except for like selling it from his house. But there's some really interesting editing that's in there, and the thing that I like about it is that it feels so anarchic. It feels so different from anything else that I may have seen. I would also say, I'm trying to pick which one I want to do. I'm going to say Hallucinations, the Polonia brothers. John
that was going to be my
Polonia,
other
Mark
one.
Polonia.
Yeah.
There's these kids that are farm. I mean, I'm from Pennsylvania. I know exactly where they lived. And it is so much of that place, and yet so out of its fucking mind that it blows me away that those guys sitting on a farm somewhere came up with this crazy idea, which is essentially, the name tells you what the story is. There are these friends and brothers that are in this house, and shit starts going really weird for them. And there's a sequence in there with someone on the toilet. And if you see that, you'll go, I have never, ever in my fucking life seen a movie that happened in. And I can't believe that I've seen it now.
First time I watched that movie, I stomped around my living room going, did I just see a kid, you know, did I just see that? No, I completely agree. That movie is so unhinged. And if you're just getting into SOV, I feel like, again, subgenres, the Polonia brothers themselves are in a whole institutional corner of shot on video of the whole legacy of American shot on video horror.
Yeah, I'll throw out a few recommendations. Speaking a little more to some silly shot on video anthologies. My personal favorite is Terror Eyes. It's 2 words, Terror Eyes. I think it's completely brilliant. It's just one of the best revivals of the Twilight Zone that I think I've ever seen. A couple other great anthologies. There's Terror Vision, not the delightful film with the soundtrack by the Fibonaccis, but the other Terror Vision is a really fun anthology. If I were to go the way that they do at the end of Soil and Green, just kind of a wash and a euphoric audiovisual experience, like I would want the film they play to be the very synthy, slow-mo, hypnotic Sledgehammer. Like that's how I want it. I will be in a state of pure bliss. Those are my final moments.
That is such a wonderfully weird, strange film that, like, while it's within a genre that we know very well, it does it in the most abstract way possible. And I absolutely love that movie to death.
One more, the same director, very different tone, like a wild tonal shift from Sledgehammer, but Killer Workout is an absolute delight. Like, highly recommend.
I don't know if it's swinging through the fences, but it certainly is like baby bathwater, throwing everything kitchen sink into a movie is Tim Ritter's Killing Spree, which just has all this insane shit that's happening. It's essentially a guy who thinks his wife is cheating on him and he's taking everybody out. But what blows me away is it's so fucking ridiculous and gonzo, but he actually has the balls to try and do a lot of special effects. It's like they're doing all severed heads and all this stuff. And I'm just like going, dude, I don't know. How did you talk all these people into doing this stuff? It's just you're out of your mind doing it. And it's done in this weird, like, there's a happiness to that movie. I don't know how to explain it, but it's an irreverent movie that somehow you're supposed to take joy with what this crazy guy is doing, or you're laughing along with it in a way that you really shouldn't be. And I kind of like when a movie can do that, where it knowingly, it's not like he's sitting there going, I'm going to say racist things because I'm a racist. It's more like he knows that this guy's an idiot. And he just runs with that and takes it to conclusions that are kind of beyond what you would normally do. And if we're talking about special effects, Olaf Ittenbach, Burning Moon.
Yep.
That whole movie. Although what I'll say about that is watch it for the special effects, because it's basically a special effects reel. I mean, the rest of it, I can't tell you what the fuck happened. I think they're in hell. Pretty sure they're in hell.
Just watch all the Olaf Ittenbach.
Yeah.
And
No mercy. It lives up to it.
And I did remember the other anthology. It's Escapes.
Sure.
Price in it, which is a line from the movie.
Yeah.
And that one, it has just like a softness, a gentleness, a warmth to it that I really love. Like if you bring a childlike sense of wonder to it, you're going to have a fantastic time with Escapes.
I would also say a historically important one that a lot of people know the title, but I'm not sure it is 1982's Boarding House. Just because it's it's the opposite end of the spectrum for me. It's one of those movies where you go, why does this thing even exist? It's the creepiest. Like, if a movie could somehow smell like a sweaty jockstrap, that movie does.
Jesus.
I mean, it's so weird. There's this moment where John Wintergate, the writer, director, star of the movie, is meditating on his desk in a nothing but a tiger stripe thong next to a bottle of vodka, and you're like, I am in the third circle of hell right now.
Jesus, man, the first time somebody showed me that movie, there is an opening text crawl that goes on for like 10 minutes. And at least it feels like 10 minutes. And I remember sitting there first time going, what the fuck am I watching right now? And
It's like somebody made Bad Idea Mad Libs or something. And they made a film out of it.
if I was going to toss out one last one, and it seems like this is going to be a whole show in and of itself
I
right now.
know.
My favorite shot on video film of all time has always been Redneck Zombies. It is Pericles Loons as a director and an editor and a special effects person. It just on that level so unparalleled, and for what it is so well put together that it is effortlessly watchable. And a lot of the jokes haven't timed themselves the best, because I mean, they're just like, you know, socially just unacceptable stuff in it, but there is still such fun to be had, and this incredibly dark, bleak tone underneath it. Like, there are moments in that movie that are pitch black. We're like, whoa. After you just watched a bunch of rednecks basically downing vodka and eating each other and being goofballs, to just like there's this character that sells, the tobacco man who sells tobacco to rednecks out of a truck in the middle of like this cornfield, and it's done. His voice is super affected, and there's like a drone track that goes on over it. And you're like, where the fuck are we all of a sudden?
Yeah,
it's a wonderful movie. And Troma's had it for years, but it's fairly easy to get a hold of. I would totally recommend that movie as like a counterpoint to this.
Right. One that I forgot about, and just because of scope, scale, and all of that, Leif Jonker's Darkness, which just the whole, I just love that movie because it's like one of those things where you go, there's a kid from high school, just got his high school friends together, got the one that kind of looked like he could act, and then just went from there. And it's kind of funny because in a weird way, what is it, Justin Cronin's The Passage, that book? I mean, essentially they stole, which is a great book, but The Passage is kind of stealing from Darkness. It's kind of the same kind of idea. And I love that opening sequence that's at the convenience store. And I love the end where essentially, I don't know, did he like close a bridge to get all those people there? And then you're just looking at a balloon slowly, shaving cream falling off a balloon, I think is what the death of the big vampire is. But I love that it has it was like one of the first ones that like Film Threat went crazy for. And because Film Threat had ads for it, I ended up getting it. And I was like, oh, this is kind of fucking fun. I love SOV as well because it makes you feel that you can do it, right? It's like what punk rock's supposed to be about, which is, there is no stage, right? The difference between the stage and the people who are in the front row. Next week, the people in the front row are going to be on the stage, and the person who's on the stage now is probably going to be in the front row. There's very little pretense. You learn as you go. There's nothing that says that you can't just start a band. There's nothing that says that you can't just do an SOV and see where it goes, and you can learn on the way.
And it's also just like the raw, unfiltered vision of it all. That's just so glorious to experience.
You have to be willing to celebrate it. And I think that's the thing. I mean, I do watch these movies with a, like a neutral density filter. I have some kind of visual story neutral density filter on me so that I can just sit there and go, okay, I can squint through this. I know what they were going through. And the very idea that they want me to see that makes me happy.
Thanks, everybody. This was an incredible conversation, and it's a great way to kind of open up as you said, kind of, it's a whole other subgenre unto itself. There's a lot of good stuff to be found. I think what you just said there, Scott, like you have to be willing to meet the films where they're at and not expect, Hollywood production values. But I think you can expect a lot of energy and a lot of really great ideas.
Absolutely.
Looking forward to having you all on again very soon. And until next time, keep searching, keep exploring, and keep sharing the scare.